Welcome to From Pixels to Celluloid, a podcast dedicated to the discussion of video game adaptations.
Well, hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode from Pixels to Celluloid, the podcast about video game adaptations. And this is the third official episode. And this is your boy, the Hypersonic 55, also known as Kurt, one half of the illustrious guest. No, we're not guests, I always this damn thing, along with my partner in crime, Vincent.
Hey, Kurt.
How's it going, sir?
Oh, turkey coma, if there's such a thing. Yeah, just the last couple of days of the year and just getting through certain things. Going through my entire Ferrero Rocher box, and yeah, some game adaptations, including a secret level, which I finished yesterday.
Yeah, man. We got a fair few interesting things to chat about in the episode today. For me, I would say I did have a decent amount of food during the Christmas period, but this is the first time in a few years where I've worked straight through the Christmas season. So this is my first day off since the 23rd. So I worked right through it. It was an interesting experience. I've worked through Christmas before, but not quite like this. So by the time I got home, I only had like maybe 4 hours to do the celebratory fun stuff for Christmas. And while most people were watching traditional Christmas movies on Christmas Day, me and my family decided to watch Unhinged, that film with Russell Crowe from a few years ago. And that film was just mental.
Nothing brings about the holiday season than a unhinged driver, I guess, right?
Yeah. Oh man, that film was something else. Just like it was just one of the sort of things you can't like pull your eyes away from. And Russell, he was committed to the role. I'll give him that, man. He has like his ups and downs in terms of his performances, but when he's locked in, yeah, it's definitely something fun to watch.
hmm But you know what's a good Christmas movie, which is
Yeah.
also set on Christmas?
Mhm.
Nosferatu. It's actually set on Christmas.
Is it really? No way.
Yeah, they have all like the decorations like halfway through the film. Spoiler warning. But yeah, it is set on Christmas, featuring our dear favorite vampire unofficially.
Fair, fair. I mean, we don't get it over here until I think New Year's Day, so
Mm.
hopefully I'll be able to see it and be able to be part of the hype. But yeah, just in terms of how this episode will work, I think what we're gonna do is like just like a sort of summary of the adaptations that came out this year. Because we had six that dropped in 2024. They were Fallout, Knuckles. Oh crumbs, I actually forgot about that. So it technically counts as seven. So yeah, there was Fallout, Knuckles, and then there was Borderlands, the Tomb Raider anime in quotation marks. It's just a cartoon. Let's just be real. It's a cartoon. There was the Tomb Raider, The Legend of Lara Croft. Then there was Arcane and Secret Level. And I think that was everything. Oh, crap. And then there was Sonic, yeah, because he routed out just towards the end of the year as well. Um, so yeah, it's funny. When we did our previous episode, I was actually going to go on to a bit of a rant about the Knuckles TV show and talk about how much of a confusing and painful experience it was, but I didn't get around to it just because we had a number of other topics to cover in the episode. But I think I might highlight that during like our look back at the adaptations of this year, talk about the good ones and the bad ones. I think it's mostly agreed upon that the ones that were really good were good. The ones that were expected to be bad were bad, and there were some that were mid. And then with Sonic rounding out the year, I think there was a certain level of hype going into it, especially with this like online feud on Twitter that, at least in America, Mufasa the Lion King was coming out on the same day as Sonic, and everyone online was trying to hope that Mufasa would get crucified by Sonic. And they kept making all these memes and Sonic Avenger 2 references that, Sonic is going to kill him. And I was curious because, like, obviously the live action quotation marks Lion King film that came out in 2019 that made 1 billion despite having such pretty bad reviews. I was wondering if that install base would translate into this one, but apparently not. That film is not doing too well for Disney at the moment, and Sonic seems to be reaping the rewards so far, which is it's always good to see as a Sonic fan, but it is a little unexpected at the same time. I guess everybody's just tired of like Disney's antics at the moment with their live action material.
Well, also, you have Sonic 3, and it's a lot of things are going for it. You have Shadow the Hedgehog, and they've been at that marketing campaign for a while now. Look, the video games that came out, the new Sonic and Shadow generations, and also, yeah, having two Jim Carreys too, right? Like, it's all connected. Like how Sega and the movie marketing really tied together to deliver this. And I'd say it's a success. Like it's a marketing success. Like I'm interested in watching it. Yeah, in the next couple of days, like I think I'm gonna check it out.
Yeah, man, and hopefully I'll be able to do some spoiler free relate. Why do I think a spoiler is the first word? But yeah, like hopefully I'll be able to try to coerce you and maybe other listeners about like why you should give this film a chance later on in the episode. But yeah, like I guess we'll just talk about like the adaptation that came out this year and just go into some details about what we like, what we disliked, and just talk about them as adaptations, I guess. So I would like to go back to the earlier side of this year when Fallout dropped, because again, Vincent, you didn't get to share your thoughts on it at the time, and I just wanted to know what did you think of Fallout in this first season?
Well, one thing with Fallout, really good to note that it did win the Game Awards as Adaptation of the Year, beating out Arcane. But at the end of the day, we know Ella Purnell's gonna, take home anything. She's gonna go up on stage, whatever
Yeah.
you do. But anyway, that aside, yeah, like Fallout, when I watch it, like like from the first episode all the way to tease the cliffhanger ending for the next season. I'd say they did a really good job. The hype is really justified. The hype kind of turned me off a bit, as most hype do.
Mm.
But at the same time, yeah, like it's a really good adaptation of what like Fallout. Like it has something for every Fallout fan. If either you're a Fallout 3 fan, not so much New Vegas because they're probably saving that for the sequel. But yeah, like if you've been playing either from the point and click adventures all the way to the 3D open worlds, I would say like they did a good job in getting it. And even people who haven't played the games and just caught on, I'd say it justifies it, like how it won best adaptation because it doesn't really you don't need to have played the game in order to enjoy the series. That's like what a good adaptation can do, right? It's like many things that adapted from novels people don't read at all.
Mm.
Um, However, like they watch the series and then they've captured the spirit of it and carried it on. And some of them, like there was a resurgence of Fallout. Like everybody's been playing Fallout from the point and click all the way to Fallout 76 due to the adaptation. And if there's success of it, that's what it is. Because it's a really tightly written story with all the characters in place. Ella Purnell's character, Walter Goggins' character. Yeah, they really tied the story together, and you really want to know what happens next. You are invested in their stories, and even like even the brother story, like I was kind of invested in, and I just wanted to see like how that's gonna play out. That was an interesting turnout. With what happened to the remnants of the survivors of the vault, right? Um,
Yeah.
yeah, like there's this one the what's his name? The Brotherhood of Steel guy.
Oh,
Yeah,
right. Yeah, yeah.
not so invested in his story so much. But he does have good chemistry with Ella Purnell, and yeah, it really shows, right? But by himself, not so invested in this character. But I'm interested to see like how they take his character in the sequels and see where that goes, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, I can't agree more. I think, again, from what I said in the previous episode, I was very intrigued by the idea of a Fallout TV show from the outset because of the creative team involved, because it was some of the people working on Westworld who came over to work on this show. And while it was a little tricky to think about how, the costuming would work in, live action, because, there was some discourse online saying that the Vault suits and certain elements of the CGI looked a little, I don't know, questionable. But I think once you start to get immersed in the world and you see it, it's like, oh, you know what? This actually looks pretty good. I think the Vault suits look pretty nice. They have a little bit of extra detailing, and I like the color palette of the show as well. It has a nice balance for a post-apocalyptic world. There's a surprising amount of color that they were able to add. There's a surprising amount of variety to the visual style of things, and I think that the show creates an interesting mystery because, there's certain things going on with characters, the Vault Dwellers, and certain things that happen in the world prior to where we are in the story now. And obviously, with the Ghoul played by Walton Goggins, you get to see, the world before we are in this current point in the story. And it's just a lot of interesting, is it little cogs turning, some background deals happening, and it's tricky to get you invested in multiple different characters who have different things going on, but then to find a way to make all their stories coalesce and come together and still as it still be very compelling and fun to watch. It's a tricky job, but I think they did well. I think, yeah, Ella Purnell and as it Walton Goggins were the more interesting characters of the three main people that they focused on, but I was still interested in seeing what was going on and that Brotherhood of Steel dude in his little stolen exo suit and stuff. But yeah, I like the choice of music. Obviously, it was very reminiscent of the choices that they would use for the games as well. And while I won't say where it showed up, the use of the Fallout theme song that you normally hear during the title screen in Fallout 3 and 4. I only remember this because I've seen my cousin play the game a few times, so I was like, they used the music. And I hate to be that kind of guy that's just like, oh yeah, this adaptation is so much better because they used the music from the games. But it's one of those sort of things that I think is important because when it comes to adaptations, it's not enough just to, emulate some of those elements, but make use of those key aspects that make that game what it is. And music is like a very key part of the identity of a lot of, video games. Certain things would not sound the same if you didn't have that same sort of title screen music or music that you get in battles or certain character themes or locations. Or sometimes again, it's literally just when you start up the game, as soon as you hear that music, I'm like, this is what this sounds like to me. And I think that they did a good job of incorporating the theme song of Fallout into the show.
It's also, yeah, I really agree with you on that one. Easter eggs and callbacks and whatnot, they're the ones that enhance it. But I would say they're icing it to the cake, they're the cherry on top. I would say they're executed with the right timing. They definitely would add to the adaptation. But as you can see, I would call it like a Resident Evil theorem where they start with that and then they don't bring up the story, they don't highlight the characters. They just try to get to the fans' heartstrings and I think that's not the right way to approach it. With that in mind, it's a good way to segue into Arcane season 2, where I'd say as much as I enjoyed certain moments of it, I would say it kind of overdoes that entire music aspect, I would say.
Uh,
Yeah,
yeah.
I hear that groan.
Yeah,
You know
okay,
what's
so
coming.
so here's the thing, man. I mean, I think the first season of Arcane is really, really good. While I'm not sure I would call it masterpiece status for me personally, I think there is so much going on for it that is just near flawless in its execution. I think one of its greatest aspects that Fallout has done as well, and some other adaptations to a lesser degree, is that, it's based on a video game that I don't think a lot of people have played, but it was able to grab so many people in because they focused so heavily on a narrative that was tight, that had like, is it interesting themes and like objectives, and the characters were all very well fleshed out. They all had personality, they had goals, they had ambitions. When like, certain characters lived, it was great. When certain characters died, you felt it. And you were able to get like, is it fully invested in this because there was so much time and dedication put into the writing that, all the political like machinations that was going on, certain characters that like did certain things, but then did certain things other times. Certain people that were like, you thought were good people actually turned out to be bad people, or they were some morally odd in between and like some area of gray that makes it hard for you to trust exactly who to follow. And again, it was just like it's this multifaceted thing that just has so many layers to it, but it's so well executed. And for a lot of people, they've never played League of Legends, as said before, but like they're fully invested in this. So I literally just rewatched the first season over the last like few days because going into season two, I wanted to make sure that I had the full context because obviously you can get recaps and that's all well and good, but I wanted to see if Arcane season one still held up for me. And I was surprised by how easily I was able to slip back into this and just say from the first couple episodes, I was in before the time jump into the present point of the story, which they obviously flowed into with season two. Now, for me, I've only got about maybe a quarter of the way into episode five of season two. And while they've done some interesting things in terms of introducing certain other characters that weren't part of the equation beforehand, or certain people that were in the background are starting to get a little bit more foreground based story. And there's certain revelations that's come to pass recently, which are surprising, that again have echoes of the past in there. I'm enjoying myself, but I feel like I'm not having the same sort of level of satisfaction and engagement as I did before. And while I haven't seen the end of the show, I have heard from like certain people that have seen it that they feel like there was a lot that was introduced in this season that wasn't like fully resolved in a satisfactory manner. I mean, I guess the only other thing I would say about it is obviously the presentation visually is still stunning as hell. The incorporation of 3D and 2D animation together, along with the distinctive art style and art direction is great. But to bring it back to the music, um, as Vincent mentioned beforehand, I think one of the things I disliked about Arcane was these sort of like music focused moments where I feel like a film score would still, be able to completely satisfy me. And while I'm not saying that there isn't a place for the use of licensed music in film and TV, sometimes it can be very effective. I do find it so I've in Arcane's case at least, sometimes it feels like you're just in a music video segment for a little bit. And especially when they were using like some of the Imagine Dragons music in the first season, it was I don't like them. And it made it very hard for me to watch some of their stuff in that first season. But in this second season, it's slightly better. But at the same time, there's still moments where I feel like the music just grinds whatever's happening on screen to a halt, and it feels a little more distracting than it should be.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. The whole music segment sequences, they were the weakest aspects of season two, to the point where, as you said, it is distracting. It does grind the momentum to a halt, and to a certain degree, it's a way to cheat the emotions that you felt. Like
Yeah.
yeah, it seems like this is how you should feel. Like it's more of a cue, like a laugh track, I would say. Like we just
Yeah.
told a joke, now laugh. Or with this one, we just showed like an emotional licensed song. Now cry, I guess. But yeah, it's almost like, oh, it's time for a bathroom break. But yeah, like yeah, that's being a bit too harsh. But yeah, I do agree with you that season one, be not being a league player, I was able to resonate with the series and go, oh yeah, this is pretty good. Like for a game adaptation. And then once episode 3 kicks in for the original Arcane season 1, I would say like that's what got me to go the whole way. And as you said, like it's not a masterpiece, but it is a solid series that got me to watch it all the way to the end. In terms of getting hyped for season 2, the last bit of season 1 kind of dragged for me, where and then it ended with a cliffhanger, which kicked off season 2 to a really explosive start, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Um, and for me, season 2, one thing, like having seen the whole 3-part series, it was a bit of the opposite effect, where as someone who doesn't play League of Legends, there was a lot of Easter eggs, there was a lot of like hidden messages that like fans would like. They did a lot of things for the fans. But I would say the rest of us who don't know the series, who don't play or have no intention to get into the League of Legends culture, we feel lost. And as you said, there were a lot of aspects and mechanics and world building that was introduced that probably could have used another few episodes or an entire season to get through. They were still introducing new concepts in the last 2 episodes where I'm just going, we should be wrapping this up. Like, this is supposed to be like the end of the series. And to the point where like I really felt that the last episode was rushed. Yeah, I agree with you. The visuals were great, and there were like individual scenes and individual episodes, like 6 and 7 were fantastic episodes. But it pretty much grinds, like it pretty much like ends for me over there. Like it's separate moments that were great, but then as a whole, it just feels chaotic.
Yeah.
Nice way of me
Right.
saying that. I don't want to use the word mess, but it is chaotic. And even with the characters, I would say like there were a few characters that like resonated with me, such as like Jinx is a great character, and Echo. Those were my two favorite characters. And yeah, like I just felt like Vi played a more supporting character, even though she's supposed to be like the protagonist. Like she didn't feel like she took center stage. Yeah, and then in the end, there's this whole Victor and Jace thing that just lost me. Really, like, yeah, wasn't into it. I
Yeah.
don't know where they went with it, but they went with it, and they're saying there's going to be more episodes featuring other worlds in the League of Legends universe, but I don't know. Like, we'll just have to see, right? But yeah, like, for me, like, it's a well done show. Like, we wouldn't just, write it off per se, but I can see why. Like, I do agree that, like, if it did win adaptation of the year, I'd be more iffy with the decision. Like I'd say Fallout is some more solid adaptation. I would say if season 1 of Arcane came out this year to go up against Fallout, I'd say that's going to be a pretty close competition. Where I would
Yeah.
say like because the first season was a really well adapted, I would say, even though I haven't really played or really have any knowledge of the material, but then at least it brought someone who's never played the game to sustain an interest in the whole 8 episode series.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you put that very nicely. And again, as someone who hasn't seen the entirety of it, I am curious to see where my opinion on this would fall. But again, I think that the show did a good job of picking up from where we ended with season one. And again, following up some of those plot lines before while like introducing certain things for other characters to do. And obviously I've only seen us to a certain degree, but I can see what you're saying about like, is it Vi from where she was in the previous season? She was like definitely one of the driving forces of the show, and she was very proactive in like, is it doing things in the show? Whereas in this season, she still has her moments, but I feel like she's been reacting to a few things more so than how she would normally go out and like, be part of certain stuff. And there's certain other characters who have taken precedent, screen wise, but as you said, there were certain elements that's been introduced into the show which I think needed at least 2 or 3 episodes just for you to really get your head around what this is, why this is important, and how it will affect, like, is it the people in the city, but also how it could potentially affect, like, the people on the ground as well. But yeah, as it stands, like, it's still a very well executed show. And obviously there's stands for this show that will, like, is it fight, defend, and, like, possibly die for, I don't know. Um, there are some sort of extreme like fandoms out there. Goodness knows I'm part of one of them. But I think it's still pretty good. I just wish that it was longer. I can already see myself saying I wish it was longer because it was announced before the second season to come out that this would be the end. And I understand that, like, you must have seen that article that came out about like how much they spent on the show for both seasons. And it was like, I think, what, 250 million, I think. And I don't know that much about, like, is it the intricacies of like 3D animation, but like when you're talking about the use of layering and compositing 3D animation and 2D animation, how they were able to mesh that together and still make it look like it all fit within the same thing, that takes talent. And you can clearly see the talent all over this production. Arcane should be what just for the visuals alone, but it thankfully has the substance to back it up when it comes to the storytelling and character work. It's just that the second season just isn't quite there, in the same way that that first season was. I don't know why, but I felt like some of the writing was just trying to figure out what to do with certain people because either their arcs had sort of naturally come to an end or they needed them to have something to do further along down the line. So they just created certain scenarios for them to do. And it's just like, okay, I mean, I guess, but this isn't exactly where I think this character would have ended up, or this is how this person would have, conducted themselves.
Yeah, just going back to like how everything just felt so rushed in the end. Like they had to make it fit the 9 episode container that
Yeah.
that delivery that they have to bring in. But then like at around episode 7 or even 8, I'm just going, how is this going to wrap up? Is it going to wrap up neatly? How much of a how will it like tie together, you know? There are still some items that, there's still some plot points in the first half of the season that they haven't even wrapped up, and then suddenly everything gets neatly tied in a bow, like somewhere in between, which writing wise, I'd say that it's a bit convenient, but watching it with some fans and it made a lot of sense for them. But others, like
Hmm.
other fans too, like other fans of the game, they watch it and they go like, this doesn't make any lick of sense. So yeah, as someone who doesn't know anything about it, that meme, LOL fans who love it, LOL fans who hate it. Like, I'm just glad to be here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh
Yeah,
gosh.
just for me going like, okay, so you're all just confused as I am. Okay. But yeah, the whole 250 million budget, whatnot. For me, like, I don't really see like I try not to make it too like a big of a deal with the whole with whole budget bits. You can see that like they didn't cut any corners in terms of the production values, right? And that's good enough in itself. I would say story-wise it meandered or had certain plot holes and hanging like stuff that they left hanging. But otherwise, like in terms of the production value, like I have no complaints.
Yeah, no, for sure. Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, just in regards to Arcane, I'm looking forward to finally finishing this thing and seeing what the crack is. But again, it seems like still an excellent show by all accounts. It's just didn't quite execute its landing towards the latter side of this season. But in terms of them making more spin-off related material, I think that's where we get into that dangerous territory because, spinning off from something that's great, you really have to have the right kind of writing team, right kind of story and characters. And while if they're continuing this kind of visual style, I'm sure it'll still be like enticing from a visual perspective, but you have to have the right kind of people, the right kind of creative team to make something because otherwise, you can have something successful, like, going from the Batman to the Penguin TV show, or you could have something like, is it Game of Thrones to House of the Dragon, where even though it has its moments where it's still pretty good, overall it's still not as good as like, Game of Thrones at its peak and, House of the Dragon second season without going into spoilers. It had its moments, but I think there was a lot of like issues, especially towards the latter side of that season. So I don't know what side of the fence Arcane spin-offs will fall into. And again, it just depends on how much they want to do of this. So I don't know.
Well, like for me, my issue with House of the Dragon is how much they're just dragging things on. Season two being, oh my God, it's such a bad like it's just a case of, sending your best character into this side quest.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
like I don't know how much you could argue how well that turned out. I would say sure. Let's see how it works for like the next couple of seasons. They said they're gonna end it in the fourth season, so I just hope that the next season doesn't drag on as much as it did with this season. But yeah, I could say the same thing for like Castlevania Nocturne, right? Like
Yeah.
there's a lot of padding in that, I would say. Just to meet the delivery of 9 episodes, and they just put too much padding to just drag on the series, and hopefully bring out like what the audiences are looking for. I think they just want more Symphony of the Night, I guess, for the next season. And I guess that's coming out next year. So let's see how like Castlevania Nocturne turns out.
Yeah, no, for sure. But yeah, with all that like arcane talk, I do want to move into the territory of pain and suffering in the form of the Knuckles TV show, which is the spin-off from Sonic 2 that dropped in 2022. Now, just for a little bit of context, as you guys know on the podcast, I'm a big Sonic fan. I live, breathe, and die for that boy. Probably not the last one, but yeah, basically, I'm just very invested in the Sonic fandom. I've been through the best and worst days, and the movies have been a bit of a godsend for the series. Even though that first one was just, another one of those like buddy road trip movies with the anthropomorphic character and human person that you've seen in, a few different forms, whether you're talking about Garfield or like the Smurfs or even that Hop movie that actually had James Marsden in it. Like, was it many moons ago, and loads of people made like a lot of jokes about that prior to the 2020 release of the first film, but it gave Sonic a little bit more layers than he has in the video games and just was able to allow certain people that weren't part of the fandom to just, step inside. And it did reverberate in the sense that I think I did see a lot of people say that they never tried Sonic prior to, watching the film and then playing the games afterwards. There was that sort of synergy that that film created. And I think that was exacerbated by the time that Sonic 2 came out. And one of the characters that really stood out in that second entry was Knuckles, played by Idris Elba. They did a really good job of bringing him back to the version of the character he was in Sonic 3, where he was just this tough, sneaky, intimidating, aggressive, powerful individual who teams up with Dr. Robotnik to get the Master Emerald. And Sonic and Tails have to team up to try and get there first to the secret location and find the Master Emerald. As you discovered in the movie, Knuckles has a bit of that Drax kind of energy in the sense that he's tough, but he's not familiar with Earth customs. So certain things go over his head, or he takes things a little too literally. But he was such a really fun character. So when the idea of a miniseries came out for him, 6 episodes coming to Paramount Plus, I was like, okay, cool. I love the character. Surely they're not going to do something that's on the same level as the films, but they're going to be able to create something of interest. So when the premise came out, there was like, okay, Knuckles is trying to figure out what he's going to do with himself after the events of the previous film. He's only known how to be a warrior, so he's just trying to figure out, okay, what is my purpose on Earth? So his idea is to train someone as a disciple to become like, as a warrior in the same way that he was trained by his Echidna tribe before they got wiped out. And this character was the police officer, Wade Whipple. At least I think this is his last name. Wade is the incompetent police officer who showed up in the first two films. He was there for, basically just comedic purposes. In the first film, he was pretty funny. In the second one, not as funny, but, okay. But then they decided to put these two together in a TV show, and the result was one of the most baffling, backwards, idiotic things I've ever seen in my life. And the thing is, it's like, I'm not like, angry at it. I'm more confused at its existence than anything else. The first episode is the best episode because it was directed by Jeff Fowler, who directed the first two Sonic movies, and it has the same kind of vibe. You have all three of the characters hanging out at the house, and Knuckles trying to figure himself out, hanging around with like, was it Maddie and causing all sorts of like interesting chaos here and there. But then once he teams up with Wade, the police officer, this show goes from being the Knuckles show, the show that has his name in the title. You might as well just like throw that out the window and then replace it with the Wade show featuring Knuckles, because that's what it is. The focus is all on Wade, this police officer who has this weird little hang up where his father left him in a TK Maxx when he was a child, and he's hung up on this idea that his dad left him, and he has this thing where when he was younger with his dad, he taught him how to bowl, and he's a really good bowler, but he sometimes chokes when it counts. Now, we end up going on this road trip with Knuckles where they end up in Las Vegas and end up in a bowling tournament where he meets his father again. But on top of that, during the last battle where Knuckles was, some of his like, is it quills were taken from that battle, and you have one of the bad guys, I think it was the dude who played the Hound from Game of Thrones, is the main bad guy in this, and where he utilizes Knuckles' powers to build machinery that he can use to basically become the next big bad. He was apparently some sort of secret apprentice of like, is it Dr. Robotnik? But now he wants to get his own back and, prove that he's the big bad. So he sends out his two little like minion people who are the equivalent of Jesse and James from Team Rocket, where they quibble. They sometimes like, do some intimidating things, but they're basically useless. And one of them is played by Kid Cudi. And Kid Cudi, he is useful and fun in certain movies where he's applied correctly. I liked him in Need for Speed. And he was quite fun in the X movie from a few years ago. But here he's just he's clearly having fun, and I don't have any issue with that. It's just the way that it's written. These characters are written, and just the writing in general. This show caters to the lowest form of IQ for children, where it's just all the same sort of tropey, silly, dumb, illogical things where you're just like, children deserve better than this. Sonic fans deserve better than this. And this is the best thing that you guys could come up with, for shame. And just, there's just moments where you're just like hands in your head, shaking your head. What is happening? Why is this in like this Sonic spin-off material? There are some interesting ideas here and there that with some refinement could have been actually pretty cool. I don't mind the idea of Knuckles trying to figure out what is his purpose when he's not hanging around with his friends, and he's not a warrior all the time. Training someone to be like, a more competent like person to save their town doesn't sound too bad on paper, but in execution, it's pretty bad. And there's an episode where basically we go back to Wade's house where him and Knuckles are on the run. So he hangs at his mum's house, and we come across his sister who works for the FBI, who I thought was joking because the way she conducts herself is not FBI at all. It feels like someone cosplaying as FBI and, just tormenting their little brother as a child would because they can. And it leads to one of the most awkward moments at the dinner table where they're just bickering with each other about the most basic crap. And at one point, she stabs him in the shoulder with a fork and he's screaming his head off. And it's so horrible. I'm like, this is what is happening right now. And it is disgustingly bad. And one of the greatest failings of any sort of film or TV show for me is an overuse of licensed music. And this show was just as bad, if not worse, than Sonic 2, where there was licensed music every other scene in the damn show. Why is Let Me Entertain You by Robbie Williams in a Sonic spin-off piece of material? It makes no sense. And for a lot of people that like Knuckles as a character, his music is very like, sort of hip hop and like jazz inspired. If you go from like the material that was used in Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure 2, they didn't even bother to use any of that music. It was a lot of random stuff from the 80s. And in the space of a year, I ended up having to hear I Need a Hero again. Firstly in Mario, then in the Ninja Turtles film, and then in the Knuckles TV show. Within the space of a year, I heard that song 3 times. I don't know who out there is making that song a thing, but they need to stop. But yeah, it's just, oh Christ. By the time it was over, I'm like, this was bad. Not good. but there were so many people defending it, and I was very confused. I mean, at the end of the day, entertainment is subjective, and you can like whatever you like. And I am not here to beef with nobody about what they like when they like, but that show was bad. There was no two ways about it. And the fact that again they mismarketed the show and led you to believe that this was a Knuckles TV show, but clearly they didn't have the budget for it, so they just decided, okay, we're going to feature this pathetic, useless cop man and get into all sort of stupid shenanigans. That's just basic brain rot material for children, and it was horrible. And I never want to think about it ever again. So yeah, I do not recommend.
Would it have just benefited Knuckles if it was short little segments, short little episodes of his like mini adventures, or even Sonic too, right? Like bite-sized 10-15 minute episodes of them just doing little things. Basically the first episode like cut into cut into like six corners and there you go, right? Like they have their own like little series, kind of like how they did like I Am Groot for Disney Plus.
See, like even you were able to come up with something like way more interesting in those few seconds than what happened in the entirety of that show. Um, Again, I think it's just that whole thing where they think, okay, Sonic caters to children. Children are okay with taking any sort of crap we throw at them. So even though we're utilizing certain elements from the video games, they surprisingly ended up taking some things from Sonic 06 of all things, which was very surprising. And the Sonic OVA with Knuckles obtaining his like famous cowboy hat that he had from the old anime. But at the same time, the overall content is still not good. You have to have a good story and characters and like, just good writing. And that writing was not good. It was just heartbreakingly atrocious and it made me sad. So yeah, whenever you're thinking about like, the Sonic, like, is it Ascension in terms of the quality of the films, just forget that TV show that happened in between. Unless you're morbidly curious, just leave it alone.
So I guess Sonic's hit that like Disney stage where they have their direct to DVD sequels, like
Yeah, I mean, like, they've clearly found that, like, not only the game's finally getting better, but they've also started to expand, Sonic into other forms of media because on top of the movies, they also had the Sonic Prime TV show, and that show definitely has its fans. Although they did say by the time that the show wrapped up earlier on this year, I believe, with season three, that it didn't have enough time to fully cook and like certain things are underutilized. I unfortunately couldn't get through the whole of the first season just because it was doing a multiverse storyline and the stuff that they were doing with some of the characters there was just not my kind of jam. At this point, Sonic, in terms of its animated material, is still best when talking about like the animated spin-off stuff that they have in conjunction with the video game. So Sonic Mania Adventures, you had those short little shorts that were dropped for the game prior to Sonic Mania in 2017. And even like the Shadow Dark Beginnings, like, is it shorts that they used prior to Sonic X Shadows coming out? That had some really good stuff where they utilized like, a sort of anime, like a kind of art style, a 2D anime style, but they utilized 3D for it. And it was some of the cleanest, loveliest looking stuff that Sonic's ever had. And again, we have these nice, really condensed material where they're able to like, do really good stuff in concise formats. But then when it comes to slightly longer things, like the Knuckles thing, it's not as good. But I don't
Mhm.
know. Yeah. I could go on about it, but I don't want to like, is it like waste too many people's time? Like, is it ranting and raving about like, is it the highs and lows of like Sonic spin-off content? Um, so yeah, I mean, there is also the Borderlands film, but I'm pretty sure both of us just decided that was not gonna be something to watch. But I don't know actually. I don't remember. Did you see it? Did you?
I avoided it like the plague.
Okay, cool, cool. Because I was
I don't know. There was not a lot to draw you into the things. Like I played Borderlands 1 and the Tales of the Borderlands series.
yeah.
I didn't get through Borderlands 2. And then after a while yeah, like the series kind of like a looter shooter genre is not exactly my cup of tea. At first I'm like, oh, this is like a pretty like the first one has like this pretty cool like RPG concept, right? But then after a while, it's item management is not really my thing. And then, like you have a bunch of guns and just selecting which is the best one. But yeah, the chaos is pretty cool. The tongue-in-cheek humor was really good. But like a lot of the criticism with the movie is they just took the worst aspects of the movie and just put it together with a highly miscast ensemble of actors that show what the original Borderlands, stood for.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, like, I don't think that the marketing did a good job of like, selling you on the film really because I don't know about you, but especially from the first trailer, it really gave off that Guardians of the Galaxy kind of vibe, just in terms of having these like, sort of weirdo, mismatched characters going off to get into shenanigans. They are, very different. They don't exactly like, as it bond well, they butt heads. And obviously with the use of the music as well, it felt very, very Guardians, especially with like the way that the title cards came up and the use of colors as well. I feel like they were aping that sort of Guardians vibe a lot. Or even the first, not the first, the second, like Suicide Squad trailer, like where they obviously tried to use Queen and the market material for there. So I wasn't on board. I was interested initially just because even though I'm not like the greatest fan of Eli Roth's material, I thought this was an interesting sort of change of pace for him. But then as I started seeing all the behind the scenes like material that had come out about how the film had been finished and taken ages to be edited and like I think there was something about like was it even Tim Miller stepping in to do like some sort of like a retooling for the film before it actually released as well. So I'm like there's a lot of behind the scenes drama that came with this, and the fact again that the film had been completed for ages. And then obviously Randy Pitchford like chatting online about like, saying we still win in the end because like, a lot of people came to play my games as well. So even though the film wasn't that successful, we still got some extra sales in our games. So I'm like, okay. But it would be great if you still had a great movie on top of that. But
Mhm.
I think it was almost like a foregone conclusion when the casting came around and even with the director as well. I was willing to give it a chance, but then I heard it was so bad. I'm like, I only have so many hours in a day. I'm not gonna, go out to see this after work and make my family pay to watch it either. So, um, I was even going to torture myself and go for a back-to-back sequence of watching Borderlands and The Crow because I
Why?
wanted to hurt myself.
There are
I just wanted
easier ways
to.
to hurt yourself, bro.
I was because there was one point in my cinema where they were playing both at the same time, and I'm like, I kind of want to know, is it that painful? Will I come out of this more scarred than before? But thankfully, work was too busy scheduling wise, so I just didn't get around to it. So yeah, I think we both dodged a bullet, but I probably will still watch it at some point just to know, because I sometimes I just need to know with certain things.
You can like tag that with Craven as well, just to
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I don't know. We'll see. But I guess like in terms of before we get to secret level, I just wanted to quickly touch upon the Tomb Raider like show from Netflix because I feel like that was one of those sort of ones that had a certain level of marketing but sort of fell under the radar in terms of like other like notable adaptations that came out. Now, I think it made the list of adaptations nominated for the Game Awards. But I think as it stands, I ended up watching it. I think it was like what, 8 episodes overall, and it was decent. I didn't have that much in the way of hype for it beforehand because I was hoping it was going to be more of an original piece of material rather than basing it on any specific continuity of the video games. But this show takes place after the Survivor trilogy of Tomb Raider games, so obviously the reboot from 2013, the Rise of the Tomb Raider and Shadow of the Tomb Raider, which came out in 2018, I think. And of those games, I've only actually played the first one, the 2013 game, but I quite liked it. I'm not gonna lie. I had a lot of fun with that game. And I thought it was an interesting sort of reboot, but I also liked the story of them, washing up on that island, the whole thing with like, is it Yamatai and like all the sort of supernatural shenanigans that happened towards the latter side of that game. Those are all the elements that were stripped out of the Alicia Vikander version, and we got a stripped down version of the greatest hits of that game in a film form. And it was all right. I think they did a lot of decent stuff, and Alicia Vikander was hardly the issue with that film. I just think that it was just a little too stripped back for my liking in terms of that film, and there was just certain humorous elements that they tried to incorporate in the first and like last portion of the film that just wasn't necessary. It's kind of stupid. But anyway, with this show, I think what they did was interesting, where obviously they try to continue the certain unresolved plot elements from the previous games, while also incorporating some of those more classic Tomb Raider elements in there, because obviously with Tomb Raider being based off of like, is it Indiana Jones? There's a lot of those sort of more wild, adventurous, larger than life sort of globe tro God, I can't even say the word. Globe, how do you say that word? Help me out here. Like,
Trotting,
is it? Yeah,
trotting. Yeah.
there you go. Thank you. So yeah, when you're traveling around the world and going to different locations, because like that's where the mystery takes you and you're trying to find all these like different things. I feel like they brought some of that more classic elements from the early PlayStation games into this. So it's like they're trying to bridge the gap between those more, I guess for lack of a better term, realistic and dramatic side of things from the reboot series into the classic era. So Lara's like, is it dealing with certain things, certain creatures and monsters, and it's very fun. There is certain cozy conventions that come with the show, which if you know how certain things play out when it comes to stories and character motivation, you will be able to guess how things play out very easily. And so there's not that much in the way of surprises, but the execution is fine. Haley Atwell makes for a good Lara Croft, and some of her supporting cast members are interesting as well. I feel like there were certain times where things were supposed to have purpose, but they didn't because, again, I'd not played like the games. So while it's approachable and it's still fine if you don't have like that prior knowledge of the games, I feel like your experience would have been enhanced if you knew about some of those core elements. I think animation wise, the show is fine, but it does that same sort of thing that Castlevania did, where they do a lot of like, crazy action sequences where they cut down on the frames of animation. So it's supposed to like, look like something that's big and sweeping and crazy in motion, but because it lacks so many frames, it doesn't have the same level of fluidity and the scenes don't, flow as well as they could do if they just decided just like, to enhance it with extra frames of animation. And the show looks okay, but then there's at times where they try to do that thing where they fuse 2D and 3D animation elements and they don't come together as well. And the villain of the show, he's okay, but certain things play out where I'm just like, you could have been better. Overall, it's more or less like, a 6 to 7 out of 10 if I had to rate it. It's fine. I was interested enough to finish it. So, there's that. It ends in a way where there's definitely still more material to mine, and I wouldn't mind seeing more of this universe, but I wouldn't say it's like, super compelling material. Let's put it that way.
Hmm. Yeah.
So,
Well, yeah, that's the thing that I don't know, something about like Netflix series. There's a show that I watched this year from Netflix, that Terminator one, that
oh yeah.
Terminator anime that came out. That's really fantastic. But yeah, in terms of series and short items, like we can go to Secret Level now, I guess.
Yeah, please. I think besides Sonic, this was probably like, was it the most interesting of adaptations that came out? Because for a while, video game adaptations have just been in the form of TV and video games. Now, obviously, you've had your comics and books and stuff like that, but when we're talking about at least, moving picture material, we've never had an anthology series before. And I thought that it was an interesting format because with anthology series, you have the opportunity to tell stories in different ways than you would in the traditional longer format that you would have, like with a TV episode or a film. And because it was an anthology based on so many different like franchises from like video games across history, I thought, okay, this is cool. And since it's coming from Tim Miller and like, Blur Studios, the people behind like, Love, Death and Robots, which is another anthology series that started on Netflix, which made a big splash during its first season, but subsequent seasons sort of like dropped off in popularity and, possibly quality. I think Love, Death and Robots, I think most of the splash that it made was because it just looks so good and has such variety in styles. The stories definitely fluctuated in quality, and that was due to the amount of time that was dedicated to each episode, the level of writing involved, and there was definitely some controversy about the nature of violence and the representation of women and the use of sex in the first season, which was definitely felt and rectified within the second and third seasons. But I think Love, Death, and Robots, again, as a format, when it worked effectively, it was pretty good. Zima Blue is genuinely one of my favorite shorts of anything I've seen for a while. And, obviously, if you could find a way to tap into that kind of material for a video game property, that'd be sick. Now, of the franchises that were announced within the secret level stuff when it dropped, I was like, okay, I'm only really invested in Mega Man and Pac-Man just because I was like, what the hell are they going to do with Pac-Man? And I've never played Sifu, but I've always liked the idea of the game mechanic of Sifu with the aging thing. So I was like, how are they going to do that in a show? So when the show dropped, they dropped the first, was it 8 episodes? And then the next seven came out a week or two afterwards. Again, a strange way to drop this thing, but the first half came out, and that's the first half that I've seen, save for the one Mega Man episode that dropped in the second half. But I would say, as an overall thing from what I've seen, I think Secret Level, it had its moments, but as a overall product, it doesn't quite butter my bread, for lack of better terms. It's close to something, but it needed some refinement. How would you say, your experience with the Secret Level is, Vincent?
Well, with Secret Level, having played quite a bit of the titles that's been featured, as well as seeing what's been offered in what's that, Love, Death, and Robots, a lot of them, sad to say, fall under tech demo type of
Mm,
material, while the others pretty much they've found a way how to capture the basis of the world and even like some gameplay mechanics. Sifu did I would say they did a good job in trying to capture that whole aging mechanic, but in terms of having known and played the games, like they did an interesting take where how would you depict a really bad run? Like someone who's played the game, doesn't have like the same skill level and then goes through the first level and basically uses up all of their aging points to and they did a good job in portraying that. And they did a good job with certain types of like the mechanics of the game being featured in like every single show. But then like there were some surprising stories that were told, especially the longer ones. Yeah, the New World Eternum, having played that game quite a bit, having tested it from pre-beta to beta to the main game. The animation voiced really entertainingly by Arnold Schwarzenegger really captures what the whole core aspect of New World Eternum, that the MMO kind of, if you skip the dialogue, you won't get like that whole people being immortal type of thing, but at the same time just
yeah.
capturing it in the story, how to like explain why you keep respawning, where like if you just play MMOs, like you just die and you just accept that like you're gonna respawn and go back, and how they explain that game mechanic was really fantastic. But I would say like the first half, the first 8 episodes really, really got the whole like what I expected from Secret Level. Second half was a little bit weaker. Possibly because maybe I don't know like many of the games that were featured, or either they haven't been released like Exodus, or I haven't even played. Like they based it off one of the mobile games, Honor of Kings, in one of the episodes, which had a pretty interesting premise, but at the same time, it's really hard to get invested with only 19 minutes and having no resonance with the core material. Like you really have to like capture you with a story, which like Crossfire X was I was actually like it was well done with how they had that concept of, like you're in teams and like everybody's justifying to themselves that they're not the bad guy. Which was like really put across. But at the same time, I'm actually going, is this animation? Because like with it felt so real, you know, like the uncanny valley was almost non-existent until there was one close up with one of the characters. It just felt like yeah, it just felt off. But then like the whole thing, I thought I was watching an actual live action movie. But yeah, yeah, a few more standouts, Unreal Tournament, and even the Armored Core story was pretty dark, but at the same time really well made. Yeah, the first half, like if I were to recommend Secret Level, watch the first half. Second half, yeah, I don't know why they did that. They put like a lot of the stories that really like didn't capture me as much as the first one, or even visually striking as the first half. Like I don't know why they split it that way instead of putting it all together, randomizing it to have some good stuff, some bad stuff. But maybe that's how they saw it, and then it just depends on the audience how they would perceive it. And for me, I perceived it as such.
Very well put. And I would agree with like a lot of what you said, especially for at least the first half that I've seen. Now, I remember going through the first episode, which was the Dungeons and Dragons one. I was enjoying what I was seeing. Again, I liked the visual style. I was into, that sort of fantasy setting where you get to see the characters with their different abilities. But without going into the area of spoilers of what actually takes place in the episode, there is a character that the squad meets up with, and he has something going on with him. And there's certain things that happen towards the end of the episode that I think is supposed to have a little bit more oomph when it happens. And I think you're supposed to be at least a little bit more emotionally invested in what's going on there. But I feel like there was at least 5 to 10 minutes in between where I needed more time to, find out what's going on with this new character, learn more about this team, and see how their dynamics played out before we got to that point at the end where certain things were taking place where it's just like we need you to, at least I feel like the what they're trying to communicate to us through the writing and how they made this thing was that this has a certain level of importance, and we need you to buy into that in order for this moment to have like resonance. But it's not quite there. It's like I don't know if I'd have more interest in it if I was like invested in the games, but I feel like there just wasn't enough time. And that's just like, I think, the statement I could say for the entirety of the show, there is not enough time. And I think it might just be a case where it just depends on the property because there's certain things that you can do with a short space of time if you are fully utilizing everything at your disposal when it comes to the writing, the story, the performances, and whatnot. But I don't know if it was just a mismatch kind of thing going on with certain properties, but certain things felt like they didn't have enough time to breathe. Certain things were over before they even started, and certain things just felt like they went on, and I was just bored. Um, Speaking of the Crossfire like one, as good as it looked, I was just not invested in what was happening at all. I initially fell asleep and I had to rewatch the portion of the episode that I missed. And I was like, okay, this looks really good, but I'm not quite sure what is happening and why I should care. I just didn't find that story as compelling as what had come before. I would say that of the first half of the show that I saw, my favorite episodes were the New World one. Sifu just for its art style and how it depicted the game mechanics. The Unreal Tournament because while I wasn't crazy big into that gaming franchise, I remember playing the first one on my cousin's PC years ago. But the story that it told with like the main robot character was pretty cool. And then of course there's the Pac-Man episode, which again, not to go into spoilers about that, but when you see that show play, well, they seen that episode play out, you're just like, how is this even related to Pac-Man at all? There's tiny glimpses of things here and there, but you're just like, what is this? And then once you get to a certain portion, you're just like, oh, this is what this is. What? How? And then there was that whole weird element where you find out like technically Secret Level was just a backdoor pilot to a new video game, which is just like, huh? Crafty, strategic bastards. Incredible.
Yeah, I would say like the Pac-Man one like really stood out. Just because like you weren't expecting it. Like, what is this? And then at the same time you're just like, what is this? And then until like, you watch that trailer for the Game Awards and you go, "Oh, okay." Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there was this game too, this Exodus game that came out in the second half that also had a trailer in the Game Awards, but that one was completely coming soon, and you're just going like, it's a pretty good premise, and it has some really resonating stuff about it with a father and daughter story. But at the same time, like, are you wondering, is this an actual RPG? Is it
Mm,
is it a shooter? Is it a flight simulator? I'm not quite sure what the final product would be, but like I'm kind of curious. So in a way, like they are advertising snippets, really, like a long form trailers to actual final product, save for say like Concord, right? Like
mm,
that's not gonna, I don't know what their plan is for the future for that property, but from what we're seeing, it's pretty much done, pretty much gone, for now at least. And yeah, even like, slight spoiler warning, they kind of had that whole Guardians of the Galaxy vibe going forward again. Which is, yeah, it's not bad. Like I wouldn't say it's like one of the weakest stories, but I would say like it had that quirky, funny type Guardians thing going on. So
mm.
yeah, give it a watch, I would say. Um,
Yeah.
and then there was this last one, the last episode, which is a funny take on one of those PlayStation commercials. But
Yeah.
they put a story in it, and it had a lot of like the Sony properties being like peppered through it. But at the same time, like how you felt with the Crossfire episode, that's pretty much how I felt with that episode. Like I don't know what they're trying to do with that one. There was like this message of please don't play live service mobile games, and then stick to the games that you've loved since you were a kid,
Oh
stop
God.
stop trying to buy skins. It's such a weird, like, I don't know what message they were trying to come up with, but then like, but at the same time, like the plot lost me.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's just one of those like PlayStation advertising that's I don't know, the movie. I guess. Yeah, one of the more weaker series. Yeah. And you said something about the Mega Man too. And they kind of did the same thing with that Spelunky title as well, where it's kind of like an origin story, but not really. But once it was getting good, the credits rolled.
Yeah, that made me so salty about Mega Man because again, I'm not like hardcore into Mega Man. I've only played a handful of the classic titles and a few of the X ones as well. But the whole thing is that like with the special episode, without again going into spoilers, you start to get a feel for the world and certain significant things happen. You're like, okay, cool. We're literally just getting into like, the good stuff, and then they cut to black, and I'm like, what? Well, hey, turn the lights back on. I was just getting into that. That short easily could have been another 10 to 15 if they really wanted to. But again, it's just like so close to something, but it was nothing at the end of it, which just makes me a little salty. I would say for me, like of the episodes that I liked the most, it was the New World one, just because it was the most fully formed story.
Hmm.
And it had like at least the closest thing to like a narrative through line and like a character arc. And while like Arnie's like, vocal performance I have heard has been criticized a little bit, he does sound different. It's like he sounds charismatic, but like monotone at the same time.
The funny thing
Um,
is, I was going like, wow, this voice actor is trying to do like a really good Arnie impression. That's like when I was watching it.
yeah,
But
yeah,
then I
yeah.
paused it because like Amazon has that cast list, right? It's like, what? It's Arnie?
Yeah, yeah. It was so weird, and I don't know if I've ever heard him do any like sort of significant voice acting before. So this was just a strange, like, sort of thing. But again, I was invested in his character. And again, I'll avoid spoilers, but the way in which his story plays out, it's funny, but it's also a little sad and
Mm.
heartbreaking. But then there's like a resolution at the end that feels satisfying. And I was just like, how have we got the only satisfying story in this is that early on, and then everything else just feels like, so choppy and
Yeah.
missing.
Mm.
And it's just so strange. But
Yeah.
I would say if you wanted to watch an episode that felt like it had at least a good start, middle, and end, that would be the closest equivalent you'd get to that, because everything else afterwards is close to something, but doesn't have enough time to be its fully formed self.
That's correct. Yeah, that's how I felt with I would say the later episodes of Love, Death and Robots, right? And then
Hmm.
after a while they just felt like tech demos. And even then, like just the concept of Love, Death and Robots, I was just wondering like if ever they, like it was pushed into like a longer form because half of them are proof of concept videos, and then like I don't know if you remember this one animation movie that came out in the mid 2000s, Nine. I don't know if you remember that.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, because I've seen like the short film for that one time and time again, and then they actually released like the full-fledged movie, which is I didn't watch the movie, but I just kept watching like the short film, and I was like, this is a pretty solid like proof of concept, which eventually got pushed into like a bigger, bigger feature, and like I haven't seen any of the Love, Death and Robots get pushed into like a larger um piece. Whereas like Secret Level, I would say like you do have this as like a shorter animation, but also it can also get pushed into like a longer video game or even like advertising for a video game. So I would say like it is kind of cheating that way in terms of if you want to see it in like a longer form, there is like Play the Game, which is what I would say like my biggest critique with the Warhammer one, because it's 'cause having played Space Marine 2, I would say like this is like a supplement for the actual game. And then if you
Yeah.
haven't played Space Marine 2 or like just know anything about Warhammer in general, like it's a really pretty story, like a really pretty thing to watch, but at the same time it's just like I don't know. I don't know if you're a big Warhammer fan, but then like watching people like watching friends of mine who don't know anything about the Warhammer games, they liked it, but at the same time, it's just like, it's one of those fleeting things that they watch and then probably forget at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, Warhammer is one of the sort of franchises that I've seen from a distance, whether you're talking about like the painted models or like the board game stuff or the video game stuff. It seems impenetrable to me. It's almost like, how you view the world of comics without like, a guide, just trying to find something that you'd like within the sea of material that's there. It can be very intimidating, and that's how Warhammer's always come across to me. I just know that there's certain games in there that certain people like, and I've been kind of curious, but like again, never knew where to jump in, so I just sort of like watched from a distance. So watching that like secret level episode, I was like, there's some really cool and interesting things happening here, but I feel like I'm missing some context.
Hmm.
I would like to, expand upon this a little bit more, maybe see a little bit more from this universe. But again, the likeness of us being able to see more of the same franchise. Again, if we're going off of the Love, Death, and Robots format, then they never really go back to anything. It's always just like that's the version of whatever you got, and then we move on to the next thing in the next
Hmm.
season. So I don't know. There is a chance that they could go back to some of this stuff. They could even spin it off, but like that would require a lot of like talks between them and Amazon, and like trying to, coordinate with whoever like, made certain game franchise to make that happen. So yeah.
Yeah, of course. One thing, like I really hope that they continue with this and see what happens with like second season or whatnot, right? See where it ends up, or see if it expands on the what was provided. But I guess like the cynic in me is just going, yeah, we're gonna get more tech demos, we're gonna get more
Mhm.
advertising,
Yeah.
and one or two really solid stories because some creators are really good storytellers. So.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm definitely curious. I mean, like I'm pretty sure I read somewhere that it has been greenlit for a second season. So, I'm curious to see when that eventually rolls around and what franchises they'll take. Whether they'll still like do an amalgamation of like, is it stuff that people know and stuff that people don't know, within that fluctuating area of like AAA to indie. I would say it would be better if they were able to focus on stuff that's at least a little bit more well known. I mean, I
Mhm.
guess it doesn't have to always be that case, but I think you'd get like a little bit more investment from like certain gamers if it was franchises that they were familiar with. But yeah, I guess we'll see.
Yeah, it's pretty much like I do agree with you because yeah, especially with the second half. You have yeah, Honor of Kings, for example. Like is that like a base builder game? I don't know. But then the whole story was these two this man challenging an AI and then just talking about their past and like cause and effect and a lot of like philosophical stuff. But in terms of what I took away from it, and then they even had this sort of like really strange, ambiguous ending. There was a suggestion, and then I was just going, like I don't know what I want to take from this show, right? Like I don't want to take from this story. Yeah, same with like Spelunky and even the Outer Worlds one, where it kind of did something interesting where it started off as quirky and one of those like fun, happy-go-lucky concepts with this like really dark undertones, but it just got progressively depressing. Like, yeah, it really touches on like what the Outer Worlds really like embodied, but
Yeah.
in terms of like the Outer Worlds, like it just maintained that like tongue-in-cheek feel, like, but then like this kind of went a little bit too far, I would say.
All right, I see. Well, I'm curious to see what that's like when I eventually get around to it. I guess the only other adaptation that hasn't been mentioned yet is Sonic 3, which you said that you're interested in like, giving a look pretty soon, but hopefully I'll just share my spoiler-free thoughts on the podcast. So yeah, Sonic 3, if you were online for any considerable amount of time, especially since the summer, the fans were basically begging for like some sort of footage of this film. There was this weird like sort of trend I saw on Twitter where there was a lot of people just kept saying during June, July, and August, these were the dates where the Sonic trailer was rumored to drop, and there was nothing for ages. And people were giving up hope, and they was like, the film was a few months away. We still haven't even got one trailer yet. But then the first trailer came out, and everybody lost their bloody minds. And the second trailer was pretty hype as well. And then having seen the film myself, I can say that the hype was real. This film is really, really fun. It's really good. And if you're a Sonic fan, especially of the material from the early 2000s, then you will be very pleased with what's in this film. It is as close to like an adaptation as you're going to get of a direct Sonic story from a game being translated into a movie. And while there were definitely compromises along the way in terms of how they had to change, condense, and remove certain elements from the backstory of Shadow and Maria and certain elements of the Sonic Adventure 2 story overall. I still feel like what they were able to come up with was something that was fun, humorous, but definitely had a little bit more emotional depth, some seriousness, and is the darkest of the Sonic trilogy so far. And it's interesting to see how far this franchise has come from the days of that horrific first trailer with that ugly Sonic that we saw when that trailer dropped in 2019, which was just one of the saddest days. And how the fans online basically just, no offense, we were correct and we bullied, like, was it like Paramount and the people there to go about and like course correct their film, pushing it back from its November 2019 release date to Valentine's Day of 2020. And coming out that first time, I was like, oh, thank God this film wasn't actually that bad. I genuinely enjoyed it. But there is this interesting through line for the films where Sonic goes on this journey of, becoming a more fully fledged character, realizing his potential, gaining a family, and realizing, is it the weight of what it is to be a hero, how to use his abilities correctly, and then coming across a doppelganger who has very similar abilities to him, who had sort of similar heartbreak in his past, but where Sonic chose, is it to course correct and is it live his life in a positive manner. Shadow has been living with the trauma of his life for a while, and once he gets released in the film, everything goes to crap. And then once he teams up with is it Dr. Robotnik and Gerald Robotnik, his grandfather, there is this interesting plot where the world is in trouble and it needs Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles to go about and help out. And the film is pretty funny. Obviously, having Jim Carrey back, you're expecting humor, and he brings that same sort of 90s energy that made the previous two films so much fun. But now that he's playing two characters in there, there is so many moments for interesting, in jokes, meta humor, and just some crazy, insane, stupid shenanigans that only work because it has that sort of Jim Carrey energy. There is one sequence in particular that I don't think I would like nearly as much if it wasn't him doing it. And as it's almost a waste of time considering the scenario that they're in, but it's so fun at the same time. The use of the video game music is so good. While it's not to the same level as the Super Mario Brothers movie that came out last year, what they were able to incorporate in this film was really good. There is a leitmotif of one of the most notable songs in Sonic history that is utilized in this film. And I equate it to the same way that the Mortal Kombat reboot film from 2021 was able to take the Techno Syndrome theme song and use that as a leitmotif across the film. So it sort of reminded you of okay, this familiar sound, we know that you know it, and we're going to sprinkle it around in various different forms and then bring it to a head at a climax portion of the film where everything just starts going crazy. The action in the film, very well executed. The CG has gotten so good where the character models are even more detailed than they were before. So much extra, close-ups on the characters' faces so you can see all the details in the fur, the eyes, how they look in different lighting settings. And the action is even more elaborate, larger in scale, and there is a third act that has so many glorious moments on screen where the film, for lack of a better term, really turns into a shonen anime. And if you know what kind of material I'm talking about in that regard, then you'll enjoy what you see. There is so many visual and verbal and audio-based Easter eggs all over the place for eagle-eyed Sonic fans to find. But I think what this film does again so well is that it incorporates these video game elements in a way that, fans who are not aware of them get to see these things for the first time and know what kind of stuff that we like in the games, see them translated into live action. And Ben Schwartz, Colleen O'Shaughnessy, and Idris Elba do a great job retaining their roles as Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles. They all banter off of each other really well and have this really great family friendship, brotherhood dynamic. But then Keanu Reeves as Shadow, he's so well realized in this film. Now, Keanu Reeves, obviously, depending on who you talk to, he has been known for is it having a bit of a monotone slash kind of low level energy when it comes to his acting. And when it comes to his voice acting, it fluctuates. In this film, I would say he had more energy and personality than I expected. He definitely gave a better vocal performance than what he did in John Wick, where I felt like he was just far too low energy and just monotone in that film for me personally. But Shadow has is it a complicated backstory, and the way in which they were able to incorporate in the film and still insert moments of humor, moments of reflection and pain and all these other sort of elements was good. It rides a fine line between being comedic and kind of serious as well. And I do feel like the humor sometimes did fall into that basic, humor that plays out for children where certain things really just needed a second pass just to refine it a little bit. But as it stands, the use of licensed music was there, but not nearly as excruciatingly overbearing as Knuckles and the Sonic 2 movie. And there are two post-credit scenes, well, a mid-credits and a post-credits. The mid-credits is the main one. And it has, again, for Sonic fans, super hype material, which has so many implications. And now that it was announced pretty early on that Sonic 4 is going to happen. It's coming in 2027. It's so weird that Sonic is going to live beyond a trilogy and have this kind of staying power. But again, the fans are really here for it. The filmmakers are clearly passionate about what they're doing. You can see how much time and energy they put into this. It's a really good, like, time at the cinema. And I think kids will lap it up. Fans will really enjoy it. There are certain elements here and there that prevent it from, like, is it being top tier, like, is it in terms of, video game adaptations. But this is another one of those films where it's putting the video game adaptations in the right light for, that ongoing narrative that video game adaptations are crap. They've been going in a better direction in the last few years, but this is one of the better ones for me. And I just hope that more people see these kind of films and just take chances and decide to make these sort of franchises that can live on beyond their video games, because Sonic is living proof that with the right kind of motivation and the right kind of team behind you, you can make some really good stuff. I'm looking forward to watching it again. I might just see it 4 times in the cinema. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, it's really good. Like, looking forward to it. Probably will check it out in the next couple of days or weeks. Any thoughts on next year's adaptations? Like anything you're looking forward to?
Oh gosh, you know what? I've been thinking about this for a little while, and I'm just like, I know there are adaptations coming out next year, but I'm not too sure. I think right now the only one that's really, like, floating around in my head is like The Last of Us, because that second season I believe is dropping next year, and with The Last of Us Part 2 being the interesting slash controversial game that it is, I'm wondering how much of that material will work its way into the second season. Because funnily enough, I actually haven't seen a trailer for, like, is it The Last of Us, like, season two. So I don't know how much is being adapted. And with the show, at least going off of like what we know from the first season, what they attempted to do in that was retell certain elements while keeping the core aspects of that story intact, while expanding on a few aspects of the world and certain characters here and there that you didn't get to see in the games, which, allowed you to get, like, is it just a better idea of how that world operates and how certain characters, like, lived in there during certain times. I'm just wondering how they're going to adapt some of this more controversial material, because they haven't had a significant time jump, like you would have in the games. I'm just wondering, okay, how are certain things going to play out, and then how is the audience at large going to react to some of these things? Because again, I can't even say anything because, like, that would be saying
Mhm.
too much. But yeah,
Definitely.
I think yeah, The Last of Us right now is the main adaptation I'm mostly interested in, because it just has I'm just curious to see how it's going to land with the fandom and like what they're going to adapt and what they're not, and how far they'll go. I'm not sure how much of that you'd be able to fit into one season if they'd end up breaking it into two halves, or, like, saving it for season three. I don't know. So yeah, that's my main answer at the moment. I might have something else later, but how about you?
Well, right now, like top of mind, sequel for Nocturne, right? Like Castlevania Nocturne.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, of course.
Possibly, seeing how like they'll do Symphony of the Night. I didn't play Rondo of Blood, so whatever that I watched like last season, I accepted it. Like I didn't have such strong opinion compared to others regarding the source material, but then for me, it's just
Yeah.
like, yeah, it was competent, it was good. And seeing like how they proceed with the sequel, like I'm just interested to see like how they go with it. They did mention that God of War is coming soon as well for Amazon, but I don't know. Amazon's a bit of a hit and miss. They had the Yakuza one like last, like a Dragon one this
Oh
year,
yeah.
and I haven't heard anything great about it. Like it came out. That's the consensus.
Yeah.
And it got nominated for TGA, but yeah, the ones who've watched it and went to me and asked me about plot cues, and I went, "What? They went that direction?" Just my disbelief, like, really?
Yeah.
Completely changed that dynamic? But at least like they sang that karaoke song, I guess. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Okay, so I did realize I forgot about the main adaptation I'm actually interested in for 2025, which I believe is coming out in October. of next year, and I believe that's the sequel to Mortal Kombat from 2021. They've got like the same director from the previous film coming back with a new writer who I think had worked on Moon Knight, I think. And they've brought back obviously the majority of the cast from the first film along with a bunch of new people. And I am super concerned, but also super excited because it seems like from what I've heard from the producers and some of the actors that worked on it, they said, okay, we've listened to the fans. We know you want to see more action. We've heard like some of the complaints and we're looking to course correct that. But also we're introducing like very key players in this adaptation that are part of like, the notable elements of Mortal Kombat lore. You've got Shao Kahn, you've got like a Kitana and like, is it Sindel? So you've got like stuff going on with Edenia along with like, is it stuff in Outworld? And this cast so far seems to have as many people, if not slightly less than Mortal Kombat Annihilation. Now, Mortal Kombat Annihilation is a film that is bad. It is very bad, but it's also one of the most hilarious things in the history of existence. But through the terribleness and the humor, I can see what they were trying to do. They were trying to take elements from like the story of Mortal Kombat 2 and 3 and try to tell this like large scale story. It's just that they did not have the time, the budget, or like, the quality of writing and like, filmmaking to pull that kind of thing off. Now, this film is attempting to basically tell a proper Mortal Kombat story with a tournament, which obviously was not in the first film, which was still baffling. They should have just called it Mortal Kombat Origins or some sort of like stupid like title like that. But you've
Which
brought
would be
back a number
cool.
of yeah, yeah. And with Cole, I really wish he had died in the last one, but unfortunately, he is still here. So hopefully, they're going to do something more with him. I'm just hoping that we'll get to see better character dynamics between all of the various individuals. I want to see some more like, is it distinctive fights with various different fight styles. I want to be able to see like, what's going on with the various different characters because obviously in Mortal Kombat you have humans, but then you've got like, people from Edenia, you've got like certain people that aren't so human looking and you've got all their weird different abilities, whether they're projectiles, teleportation or punching and cracking things. So I just hope that they have like learned from the previous films and give us more elaborate and well choreographed like fight sequences. I do hope that Benjamin Wolfish like comes back for the to score this film because I feel like his score was actually one of the best aspects of the film. But yeah, I need this to be good. I need it to be good. I feel like I'm almost in the same position as I was with Sonic 3, where I needed that to be good beforehand. But Sonic had like at least a decent track record with like the first film going into the second one. Whereas this, like Mortal Kombat 2021 had its moments, and I genuinely do think it has like some pretty sick stuff in there, but there was a lot of mistakes made, and it's not a film that I can easily recommend. So I'm hoping that they have like made something work out, but we'll see.
We'll see.
But yeah, I think that's it. I mean, unless there's any other like is it elements you wanted to bring up before we wrap this up?
It's pretty good. We've It's a pretty meaty episode coming through the end of the year and hoping for a better one. So I guess we'll leave it at that.
Yeah, no, 2024 has had its moments, but I think like it's also had like some downs as well. So I'm hoping 2025 is going to be even more interesting, not only in terms of stuff for life and new adventures and whatnots, but also just for video games and adaptations in general, because we've had to deal with a lot of BS this year, and I'm hoping that some companies and studios and like some of these people behind these projects will be able to, stop the BS and like create some new and interesting experiences, but only time will tell.
Yep. We can only hope.
All right. Well, I guess with all that being said, we'll bring another episode to a close. Thank you for listening, ladies and gents, and whatever your thoughts are, please leave them in the comment section below, or check out the podcast where all podcasts can be found. And yeah, I mean, we also have an Instagram. It's pretty bare bones over there at the moment, but like any sort of support you would like to share in terms of like subscribing and interacting with us would be great. And Yeah, I mean, I can be found as Hypersonic55 on all places on the internet, especially when it comes to the art stuff. And my other podcast, Film Focus. And yeah, Vincent, anything you want to plug before you bounce?
Pretty good for now. You can find me also. You can reach me at Instagram at from Pixels to Celluloid. So Happy New Year, everyone.
Yeah, Happy New Year, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you had a good Christmas time and hope your transition into 2025 is super cool, super chill. If you go out drinking, don't go too hard. And if you're chilling indoors, make sure you go to bed at a decent time, I guess. I guess I'll catch you guys in the next episode. So until then, yeah. Bye.
See ya.